The first Warcraft story was improvised in the recording booth by a single person. It served its purpose of giving the player meaning as to why they were striving towards victory, but there wasn't much there. Warcraft 2, on the other hand, has a much more complex story compared to the first game. Released in 1996, the game is an improvement over the first, with each army receiving new types of units, the overall game speed increasing, and quality of life improvements such as drag select and unit groups. The game also introduced new concepts to the series, such as fog of war, naval combat, and the myriad of both human kingdoms and orc clans. The story of the Second War is much more fleshed out than the First War, and with an expansion that doubled the size of the story, we have a lot more to dig into. If you want to follow along with the next story, subscribe for more. Unlike the first Warcraft, where the story generally happened in the order presented, with either campaign weaving in and out of each other, I will be taking a different approach to Warcraft 2. After spending countless hours trying to weave each campaign in a way that both makes sense to Warcraft 2's story, makes sense to the story of the Second War, and is presented in a tidy manner, I have reached the conclusion that the game's timeline conflicts too much with the events presented in other accounts of the Second War. Instead, the story of Warcraft 2 will be presented with its missions out of order. This new order will instead mirror the order of events from the novels and the Chronicle. As frustrating as it is, this is simply the easiest way for me to display what happens. If you like this content, subscribe for more. 6 years after the Dark Portal first opened, Doomhammer ponders the future of his people. With Stormwind in ruins and the humans purged from the land south of Blackrock Spire, this world could potentially be a new home for the orcs. However, those that fled to the north are sure to warn others of the orcs' presence. It would be better, Doomhammer decided, if the Horde sailed north to crush any resistance before they can mobilize and threaten their supremacy. With their resources drained from the First War, Doomhammer turns his eyes to the dwarven lands of Khaz Modan. Doomhammer himself would lead a siege against the capital of Ironforge, sending the Blacktooth Grin clan to pillage the lands, and make their way north towards Stromgarde. Their first stop would be to take the city of Dun Modur, which lay as a key strategic point that connected Khaz Modan to the south and Stromgarde to the north. It would be the first of many to fall. If you like this content, subscribe for more. The Ogre Warlock Cho'Gall has decided to personally check the refineries in Grim Batol, a dwarven city abandoned by the Wildhammer clan. There, the Bleeding Hollow worked hard at maintaining the refineries to fuel the ships to carry the Horde north. Cho'Gall himself was a massive two-headed ogre that served as an apprentice to Gul'dan. During the First War, he offered to attempt to lead the unruly Twilight's Hammer clan when Blackhand was threatening to wipe them out. They believed that the Horde was a harbinger of a doomsday prophecy known as the Hour of Twilight, and crossed over the Dark Portal into Azeroth. However, once they set foot on the New World, the Twilight's Hammer would go into a frenzy as they heard the whispers of a dark force beneath the earth. Cho'Gall used their beliefs to align them to the Horde, pleasing Blackhand, and elevating himself to their chieftain. He did not believe in their prophecy, but in time, he would come to know the truth of the old gods. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Mobilizing the Horde on Draenor would have been a monumental undertaking, and impractical if Doomhammer wanted to destroy the North before they could retaliate. They would need to look for allies in this new world, but they would not need to look far. The Amani trolls despised the elves of Quel'thalas, and sought out the Horde to pledge their support in exchange for freeing their leader, Zul'jin. The ogre clans they brought from Draenor and their new troll allies would build crude ships to take them north. After Stormwind was destroyed, its riches fell to the hands of the Horde, who had no need for gold. The goblins of the Steamweedle cartel, however, had a lust for gold and offered their services. They would supply ships, maps, and information for the Horde. While Doomhammer could have simply crushed any resistance and taken the help of his new allies, that was Blackhand's way, and he was determined to lead a better example. Under his leadership, his allies would be treated as equals to the orcs. If you like this content, subscribe for more. As refugees from Stormwind arrived in Lordaeron, King Tyrannus Minethil called for the Council of Seven Nations. Lothar called for the creation of the Alliance to stand against the Orc Horde, but not all were convinced. Gilneas believed that they could stand alone, while Alterac argued there was no hope against the Orcs. It was one of Lordaeron's famed priests, Turalyon, that rallied the Council into action, and pointed that the Horde would not be stopped unless they stood together. Stormwind had already fallen, and it was only a matter of time before they were next. The vote was unanimous to form the alliance, and it was Anduin Lothar that was entrusted as the commander of their military efforts. His first order was to organize humanity's forces to Hillsbrad to stop the Horde's advance before it could reach too far to the north. If you like this content, subscribe for more. When Gul'dan awoke from his coma, he found the Horde different than when he left it. With Black Hand as his puppet, Gul'dan ruled the Shadow Council, and the will of the Horde was his will. But with Doomhammer in charge, and the Shadow Council gone, he had few allies left. Gul'dan convinced Doomhammer that he could still be useful to the Horde, as he was one of the few surviving warlocks. Doomhammer did not trust Gul'dan, but agreed to let him live, so long as Gul'dan continued to serve the Horde. Thus, Gul'dan began to work on the most perverted of his creations. Taking the hearts from the corpses of his slain council members, he intended to resurrect them once more. Though the Orcish dead were seen as sacred, the corpses of Stormwind Knights would make perfect vessels. Gul'dan infused the souls of the Shadow Council into the bodies of the slain knights, raising them as blasphemous Death Knights. Armed with necromantic magic, they would serve the Horde during the Second War. If you like this content, subscribe for more. A convoy of elves passing through Taran Mill would be captured by the Amani Trolls, an enemy of theirs from ancient times. Once they had been freed, Lothar looked to Quel'thalas for aid. As a descendant of King Thoradin, he called upon an ancient oath the High Elves swore to when the humans helped the elves during the Troll Wars. King Anastarion's Sunstrider was reluctant, but sent a small fleet to the Alliance regardless, not seeing the Horde as a major threat. Despite this, some elves chose to join the Alliance of their own volition and fight against the Orcs. Though Lothar was disappointed with the official response from Quel'thalas, he welcomed all who arrived, especially the famed elven archers. If you like this content, subscribe for more. When Northshire fell, the priests fled north with the people of Stormwind. The power of the light was a powerful force, but the clerics were ill-suited to combat. Archbishop Alonsus Fowl and Lothar would come together to come up with a solution to this problem. A number of priests and warriors were trained stringently in both magic and combat to create the first paladins. They would form the order that would become known as the Knights of the Silver Hand, named after the legend of the Silver Hand and the legacy of Keeper Tyr. They would accompany the forces of the Alliance to Hillsbrad. 5 paladins would stand above the rest and would be given enchanted librams to become the embodiments of core tenets of their faith. Uther, the first paladin, would hold justice. Saidan Dathrahan would hold holiness. Tyrion Fordring would hold retribution. Tyralion would hold protection. And lastly, Gavinrad the Dire would hold compassion. If you like this content, subscribe for more. When Stormwind fell, a strange artifact was discovered and gifted to the Dragonmaw clan for study. Its purpose would not become clear until after the attack against Khaz Modan. The Red Dragon Alexstrasza was searching for the mysterious artifact known as the Demon Soul, and her hunt led her straight to the Horde. Figuring out the Demon Soul's magic, Necros Skullcrusher used the Demon Soul to subjugate Alexstrasza and bring her to their new fortress of Grim Batol. There, the Dragonmaw would force Alexstrasza to lay eggs, which would be magically induced to hatch. The whelps would be broken from birth into deadly mounts for the Horde to use. The other members of the Red Dragonflight were fearful to retaliate, as they worried the Dragonmaw would kill their matriarch if they interfered. Many of the Red Dragonflight were captured and enslaved, such as Alexstrasza's consort, Tyrannostraz. But others, such as Coriolstraz, would work in secret to free his kind. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Despite their best efforts to hide, the Horde fleets would be discovered by the Alliance. The Warchief had his eyes set firmly on Lordaeron, knowing that if it fell, the rest of the human lands would quickly crumble. Lord Admiral Dalen Proudmoore led the Kultiran fleet against the Orcs and began to lay waste to their ships. As Kultiras was primarily a seafaring nation, it had a lot of experience with naval combat. As countless Horde soldiers drowned and ships were blown apart by cannon fire, Doomhammer called in his secret weapon. Although Necros was a bit hesitant since the dragons had yet to be properly trained, he sent riders to tear apart the enemy fleet. The gamble was a success as the Kultiran fleet burned beneath the dragon's flames. Proudmoore was forced to call for full retreat as the Horde pressed on towards Lordaeron. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Doomhammer's forces made landfall in Hillsbrad and began to make their way towards the Alterac Mountains, which would serve as a direct, if treacherous, path towards Lordaeron. With the Alliance forces rushed into the area without any pre-existing defenses, the Horde crushed all opposition. Death Knights led the charge against the Hillsbrad countryside, and the human defenses buckled under their terrifying onslaught. It would not be long before the Knights of the Silver Hand would rally the forces in the area and strike back against the Horde. Death and holy magic were flung at either side, with the Kirantor mages of Lordaeron raining fire upon the orcs. With the paladins restoring the morale to the human forces, the Battle of Hillsbrad would be a long and drawn-out conflict, with neither side claiming victory. If you like this content, subscribe for more. As the battle in Hillsbrad continued, a stalemate began to develop, and Doomhammer decided to look at other avenues to take Lordaeron. The Amani trolls knew the area well, and reminded of his promise to free their leader, scouts were sent to find him. Finding him in a prison camp near Durnhold Keep, Zul'jin was freed and led the orcs into the hinterlands. Although initially reluctant to join, the prospect of destroying the elves in Quel'thalas that had stolen the land of his people was too big of an opportunity to reject. The Horde would encounter Dwarven resistance in the hinterlands from the Griffin-riding Wildhammer clan, and in the ensuing chaos, Scarona escaped from her jailer into the surrounding wilderness. Breaking through the Wildhammer defenses, they would go around Alterac and into the lands of Lordaeron. If you like this content, subscribe for more. With the orcs advancing north, actions must be taken to ensure that the local towns and villages are well defended. One such town that Lothar had stationed troops at is Tyr's Hand. Known as the City of Churches, it was home to a large abbey consisting of a main hall, hall of arms, and a library. The town would become heavily fortified with a barracks and blacksmith constructed in the city to supply troops with lodgings and arms, but it served a much more important purpose during the Second War. To the elves of Quel'thalas, Tyr's Hand was one of their major supply lines with Lordaeron. As soldiers marched into the area to increase its protection, the local peasantry fell into a state of revolt, fending off the Alliance military. The Alliance army swiftly organized and was forced to fight against their own people, quelling the uprising. Only later would the revolt be revealed to be a diversion. Spies had sown chaos in the area in the hopes of covering up an orcish mining facility located nearby. The Alliance would soon learn that a traitor exists in their midst. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Gul'dan, hoping to sow chaos between the human forces to the west and the elves to the east, set his eyes on the island of Caerdaro. There rests a monolithic elven runestone that was meant to protect the island. The navy present in Daramir Lake would swiftly fall before the might of the Horde, and Caerdaro would be wiped away in a tide of blood and broken stones. With the runestone secured in orcish hands, Gul'dan got to work. The runestone was thrumming with elven magic which would be perverted and carved into to create altars, called the Altar of Storms. Though much of the powerful magic wielded by the warlocks was lost when Doomhammer called for their extermination, Gul'dan used these altars to imbue their ogre allies. The ogres were simple and brutish creatures, but with the twisted elven magic, they were uplifted into intelligence. Now cunning and devious, they would serve the Horde only for as long as it would benefit them. If you like this content, subscribe for more. With the Knights of the Silver Hand keeping watch over the Northlands, Archbishop Fowl's assistant, Uther, went from town to town to offer comfort and healing to any that are suffering from the war. As they head to the island city of Caerdaro to help them recover from the recent orc attack, they are intercepted by the Stormweaver clan. Daramir Lake was alight with cannon fire and the breaking of ships as the conflict drew the humans closer to Caerdaro. However, the orcs were not their only concerns, as human pirates were also on the hunt for Alliance forces. With their destroyers and battleships distracted, transport ships managed to sneak through the enemy navy and escort Uther safely to the shore. As the battle turned in the Alliance's favor, the orcs retreated and a number of pirates would be captured as prisoners. Following the Second War, Caerdaro would be restored and the manor built on the island would become the home to the greedy Barov family. If you like this content, subscribe for more. A number of renegade human and elven prisoners were captured during the conflict at Caerdaro, wearing the red colors of Altera. Of special interest to the Alliance, Lothar orders that they are to be transported to Lordaeron for interrogation. As the prisoners are being escorted through the Eastweald towards Stratholme, they are intercepted by the Orcish Horde. Moving through the snaking river and then crossing the lake, a preliminary interrogation is performed as mages look through the minds of the pirates from afar. Whatever they found was not good, as they would be swiftly transported west towards Capital City. Curiously, in a previous version of the game that was changed before its release, the recovered prisoners were actually a number of orc warriors, along with the villainous warlock Gul'dan. While the storyline would never see a conclusion, one has to wonder what might have been had they not changed it. If you like this content, subscribe for more. One thing that Doomhammer learned from the Battle of Hillsbrad was that the Alliance would be much more difficult to conquer than Stormwind had been. The strength of their Death Knights was matched by the opposing Paladins, and so Doomhammer would need all of the support he could get. Although heading to Quel'thalas was much more north than he would have liked, the support of the Amani trolls would be instrumental in taking Lordaeron, which meant fulfilling his end of the bargain with Zul'jin. Quel'thalas would fall. While the Horde marched to the north, a small force was left behind to cut off any support to the Elves. Tyr's Hand was a major supply line directly to the Elves, and with an orc mining facility already set up in the region, a stronghold would be set up in Tyr's Bay to cut off any resources through the area. With the help of the Ogre Magi, Tyr's Hand would burn, and from the ashes an orc stronghold would be constructed. With their navy keeping a sharp watch over the area, the Elves would be on their own. If you like this content, subscribe for more. After clearing up Tyr's Hand, the small force moves west towards the port town with intentions of laying waste to it. Stratholme was a major supplier of oil to the Alliance, and as a large shipment was to be sent towards Lordaeron soon, the Horde could not allow its refineries to continue operation. With their offshore oil platforms burned and the shipment now in the hands of the Horde, they would head towards the north and regroup with the rest of the Horde. There, Zul'jin returned to the Amani capital of Zul'Aman and rallied his people to joining the Horde. The army that marched against the Elves was unlike anything they had seen for hundreds of years, as fell-drunk orcs and trolls pounded at their doorstep. The Elves had a number of magical runestones similar to those in Cerdaro erected in order to shield their presence and the powerful energies of their font of power, the Sunwell. The runestones also had the added effect of limiting the magic of the Death Knights and troll witch doctors, but with their destruction, new altars of storms were constructed. The assault of Quel'thalas had begun. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Though Turalyon and the forces of the Alliance arrived to support the Elves, they were too late. Doomhammer's forces pushed through Eversong Woods and forced the Elves to retreat within the city of Silvermoon. The Dragonmaw had trained a number of red drakes, which descended upon elven lands and burned all who were unfortunate enough to fall under the shadow of their wings. King Anasterion needed little convincing from this point, and fully pledged his people to the Alliance. Not since the Troll Wars had the Elves been slaughtered in such numbers. Within Silvermoon, the Elves erected a great magical wall by drawing energy directly from the Sunwell, which not even the Dragon's Fire could breach. The destruction of Quel'thalas had never been a priority, and although his pact with Zul'jin had yet to be fulfilled, Doomhammer set his sights to the west. Gul'dan promised Doomhammer that his Stormreavers could bring down the shield, and so Doomhammer diverted his forces towards Lordaeron, hoping to catch the Alliance by surprise. Only too late would he realize Gul'dan's true intentions. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Gul'dan had always planned to betray Doomhammer, and with the perfect opportunity, he led the Stormreavers out into the ocean, along with Cho'Gall and his Twilight's Hammer. There, Gul'dan would drag the Broken Isles from the seafloor and open the tomb. With grandiose promises of power to be gifted to all who helped him, Gul'dan would lead a number of warlocks inside. Although the circumstances remain unknown at this point, Gul'dan would die within the tomb, and his skull would be turned into a terrible artifact that held the power of the warlock. The skull would be returned to Draenor as a trophy. 20 years later, a night elf named Maiev Shadowsong would find Gul'dan's writings within the tomb, as he described what happened. Trapped in the dark and foreboding vault, Gul'dan's servants abandoned him and were killed by the demons that guarded the tomb. Gul'dan himself would be ambushed, and while he fended off the tomb's guardians, he would ultimately expire before he managed to claim the power he had sought since stepping foot on Azeroth. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Once word reached Doomhammer of Gul'dan's betrayal, he sent the Blacktooth Grin clan after them. Once on the Broken Shore, they were to exterminate every last member of the Stormreaver and Twilight's Hammer clans. Cho'Gall led the assault of defending the tomb, but he would eventually flee with the shattered remains of the Twilight's Hammer. They would sail west, hearing the mysterious voice that would lead them to the gates of Ahn'Qiraj, and opening the Twilight's Hammer to any race that would join their cult. Most of the Stormreavers would be wiped out, with only a few of their numbers fleeing west or remaining behind on the island, such as Drak'Thul. A copy of Gul'dan was left behind for the Blacktooth Grin to kill, thinking they had defeated the warlock and not following him into the tomb. The Blacktooth Grin Grin had no intention of entering the tomb regardless. Wandering the island were a number of fearsome demons that had emerged once Gul'dan opened the tomb, slaughtering anything they came across. When the orcs left, the tomb would remain above the waves and open to others drawn to its power. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Moving his forces west, Doomhammer hoped to catch the Alliance off guard. Half of their army was down in the hinterlands, and the other half was back in Quel'thalas. Lordaeron was virtually undefended and perfect for the taking. While a number of routes existed, the most direct route would be through Alterac. Lord Paranoid was already wary about the orcs when he had first heard of their march to the north, and so he met with them as the Horde approached the mountains. He would ensure that his people survive, even if it meant betraying the Alliance. A deal was struck between Paranoid and Doomhammer. The Horde could pass through the mountains so long as the people of Alterac remained unharmed. Doomhammer kept his word, and what should have taken months of breaking through Alterac's barricades was only a short march. On the other side of the mountains was the mage city of Dalaran. Both Dalaran and Lordaeron were caught completely by surprise by the Horde, and Doomhammer was able to demolish the city. After Dalaran was razed, the mages focused their powers into an artifact known as the Eye of Dalaran to repair the city and rebuild its great spires. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Turalyon knew that something was wrong when word reached him of the Horde's invasion of Lordaeron. However, the interrogation of the prisoners from Cerdera only confirmed his suspicions. The orcs did not need to fight their way through Alterac, but instead, Alterac had betrayed the Alliance to the Horde. Turalyon pulled his forces from Quel'thalas and marched towards Lordaeron. As many forces as could be spared would be sent to Alterac, however, to deal with the traitors. Alterac would be locked under siege, and Lord Paranoid taken as a prisoner to await trial should the Alliance claim victory in Lordaeron. Alterac's defenses were put back into place, and the mountain pass was cut off. Should Doomhammer attempt to recall his forces still stationed in the hinterlands, they would not find an easy journey through the mountains. Turalyon's forces would be forced to take the mountain pass through Alterac in order to catch up to the orcs in time. Though the city had enough food and supplies to hold out for weeks, Turalyon could only hope that the soldiers defending Capital City would be able to defend it for that long. If you like this content, subscribe for more. At last, victory was at hand for the Horde. Doomhammer launched a full siege of the city with the forces still under his command. King Tyrannus would not go down quietly, however, and would join his forces on the ramparts to lead his people in battle. The city held out for many days, and while Doomhammer admired the tenacity of Tyrannus, he knew the city would not hold. Every day, more of the city's defenses would crumble, and it was only a matter of when, not if, Capital City would fall. His confidence would waver with the arrival of Turalyon's forces. Not only would Lordaeron receive a large number of reinforcements, but their presence meant that their allies in Alterac were already dealt with. So close to victory, and yet the battle was already over. Even if the Horde took Capital City, they would not be able to defend it. With little other choice, Doomhammer was forced to call for retreat, sending a dragon rider to the hinterlands to recall his forces. They would regroup in Khaz Modan, where hopefully they could regain a foothold. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Lothar regrouped his forces and pushed south into Khaz Modan. Without their ships, the Horde would need to make their way on foot, which gave the Alliance time to organize and launch their fleet. Although the Northlands lie in ruins from the Orcs' rampage, the war had a chance of finally coming to an end. Reclaiming the keep at Tol Barad, the Alliance used the island to launch their attack against the Orcs stationed in Dun Modur. Dun Modur was positioned at the Thandol span that connected the wetlands of northern Khaz Modan and the Arathi highlands of Stromgard. The Orcs had managed up until this point to hold the Dwarven city, and had used its position to prevent any Alliance forces from crossing the bridge into Dwarven lands. The forces in Dun Modur were not prepared for the Alliance to attack from Tol Barad, however, and a swift victory was achieved. With a strong foothold, the Alliance could march south and continue to chase the retreating Horde. If you like this content, subscribe for more. The Alliance would chase the Horde down into Dun Algaz, and with its liberation, they marched down towards Ironforge. When Doomhammer first launched his invasion of Khaz Modan, the Bronzebeard dwarves retreated into their mountain fortress and sealed it off. The gnomes similarly hid away in Gnomeregan. Doomhammer threw everything he had against the doors of Ironforge, but they would not yield. For every dwarf that was struck down, they would drag 10 orcs down with them. Every resident took up arms, knowing this was their final stand. As time went on, Doomhammer saw the siege as a fool's errand, and they already had the resources they came to this land for. He left behind the Bleeding Hollow clan to keep the dwarves occupied as the rest of the Horde made their way north. With the Horde now heading south, hoping to fortify themselves in Blackrock Spire, the Alliance pushed out the Bleeding Hollow and ended the orc threat in the area. Grateful for their aid, the dwarves and the gnomes would lend their aid to finish off the orcs once and for all. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Hoping to strike a major blow to the Horde, Lothar led his forces to Grim Batol. The oil refineries that once fueled the Orcs' ships would burn, further pushing them out of Khaz Modan. The Dragon Maw chieftain, Zulahed, was called upon by Doomhammer to rally their dragons in Lordaeron and head to Blackrock Spire. Although Zulahed led a number of his forces south, not all of the Dragon Maw left. The Alliance remained unaware of the Horde's presence deeper within the stronghold, and left the Dragon Maw untouched in their attack. Deep in Grim Batol, Alexstrasza was still being tortured by Necros, who would take control of the remaining forces in the area. Had the Alliance been aware of the dragon's presence, they could have potentially rescued the Red Dragon aspect, and cut off the Horde's access to the dragons that torched the Quel'thalan fleet and burned Quel'thalas and Lordaeron. Alas, Alexstrasza would remain a prisoner, and the Dragon Maw would continue with their work. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Dragon Riders carried the news to the returning Blacktooth Grin clan of Doomhammer's retreat to Blackrock Spire, and so they diverted their course towards Stormwind, where they would travel on foot to the stronghold. Their new path would lead them by Crestfall, just off the coast of Quel'thalas. What was originally supposed to be just a patrol led by Lord Admiral Proudmoore led to him discovering the Orc ships, and he ordered his fleet to engage the enemy. When the dragons descended upon the Quel'thalan vessels, Proudmoore did not call for a retreat. With the Griffin-riding Wildhammer dwarves on their side, who had learned new tactics since Quel'thalas, their lightning-infused hammers drove off the dragons. Without any air support, most of the remaining Orc navy was sent to the bottom of the ocean. Although the battle was a decisive victory for the Alliance, it wasn't without its casualties. Proudmoore's son, Derek, had perished during the battle, which instilled a hatred in the Lord Admiral that would last until the end of his days. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Doomhammer watched the Alliance break through into the Burning Steppes and make their way to Blackrock Spire. Reinforcements would not arrive in time, so Doomhammer played his final gambit. Leading a suicidal charge with the rest of his forces, Doomhammer cut a path straight to Lothar, where the two became locked in single combat. Both warriors fought bravely, but Doomhammer crushed Lothar's skull and turned the battle in their favor. Turalyon would not let this stand and took up the mantle of leadership. Using holy magic, he used Lothar's broken blade to knock out Doomhammer and send his hordes scattering. Those captured would be locked in chains and taken back up north as prisoner. Lothar would be avenged, and a statue dedicated to him still stands outside Blackrock Mountain, where the warrior fell. All that was left to honor his memory was to forever destroy the Dark Portal. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Much of the army that escaped the battle fled south, knowing their survival hinged on them escaping back to Draenor. Turalyon and his forces would take up the name the Sons of Lothar and follow the Horde into the Black Morass, where the Orcs led them straight to the Dark Portal. The Death Knights would command their forces to hold off the Alliance as they overtook them, and one of the most brutal battles of the Second War unfolded, as the Orcs held their ground to allow their brethren to retreat through the Dark Portal. It was not much, but it allowed most of the Horde to escape until the Alliance pushed back their vanguard and forced them back through the portal. They would not pursue the Horde, as the Alliance soldiers were already weary and at their limit, but they would not stand idly by as the Orcs rallied the other clans on Draenor and came charging back through. They would end this conflict once and for all. If you like this content, subscribe for more. With the Alliance looking on towards the great monument to evil, Archmage Khadgar called upon his arcane magic to call down as much power as he could. The portal began to unravel as other mages joined in, and the link between the two worlds was severed. The backlash of energy from the portal closing caused the structure to explode and crumble in on itself. With its destruction, the Alliance could breathe a sigh of relief. They had won the war and crushed any hope of the Orcs returning to their world. Unbeknownst to them at the time, however, was that although the portal itself was destroyed, the rift remained. Fell magic would seep through it and continue to taint the land, bleeding out from the ruined Draenor. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Not all of the Orcs made it back through the portal. The Bleeding Hollow clan arrived during the final siege of the portal, but was cut off by the Alliance. They disappeared into the jungles around the portal, biding their time. The Dragonmaw clan retreated to their fortress of Grim Batol. The Alliance had completely missed their activity deep within the stronghold, and thus it remains a haven for them. With Alexstrasza still under their control, they continued their work of breeding and breaking red dragons as weapons and mounts. The Blacktooth Grin clan sailed back to Horde lands and arrived after the portal was long destroyed. They gathered Horde survivors from the Blackrock clan and continued to Blackrock Spire once the Alliance had left the region. Many others, though, remain scattered throughout the Eastern Kingdoms. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Dalrend and Main Blackhand, the leaders of the Blacktooth Grin and Blackrock clans, reclaimed Blackrock Spire as their stronghold. Orgrim Doomhammer had failed the Horde and led them to ruin, and now the siblings denounced his leadership. Learning of other clans that still remained, they contacted the Bleeding Hollow and Dragonmaw clans, intent on forming a new horde under their own leadership, which they deemed to be the true Horde. Kilrock Deadeye of the Bleeding Hollow had no interest in their false horde, but the Dragonmaw orcs that had not yet retreated to Grim Patrol offered their support. They would also receive allies from the nearby trolls, namely the trolls of the Smolderthorn and Firetree tribes, and the Spirestone Ogre clan. The Dark Horde would come into conflict with the Dark Iron Dwarves that lived within Blackrock Mountain, leading to the death of Maine, but Dalrend captured upper portions of their city after allying with the dragon Nefarian. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Most of the remaining orcs in Azeroth were no longer a part of any clan. They were left scattered all over the Eastern Kingdoms, surviving either alone or in small groups. The Alliance, still seeing them as a threat, opted to hunt down these fragmented groups. Groups were formed to hunt them down. The wilds were combed over from the deepest forests to the most remote of mountains. Many orcs were rounded up and placed in captivity with those captured during the Second War, but some of these hunting parties let their hatred overtake them, taking a stance to kill any orc on sight. The orcs that had been captured were taken back to Lordaeron as prisoners. There, some were taken down to the vast network of prisons, sewers, and crypts called the Undercity. Doomhammer himself would be imprisoned here, silently waiting for an opportunity to escape. If you like this content, subscribe for more. The High Elves would not easily forget the Alliance's abandonment during their darkest hour. When they fled to Lordaeron, the Amani trolls would be the Elves' problem to deal with alone, which caused a heavy toll. Despite King Tyrannus pointing out how much human blood was spilled in defense of Quel'thalas, the relations between the human kingdoms and the Elves would begin to deteriorate. The Elves would treat the other members of the Alliance with a cold disdain that only further worsened the situation. King Anasterion Sunstrider would take decisive action and claim that it was the humans' poor leadership that led to the destruction of Eversong Woods. Whatever debts he owed the humans was paid, and the majority of Elven society shut their doors to the outside world. Not all of the elves took this stance, with priests, mages, and Anasterion's own son, Quel'Thas, continuing to make contact with the other nations, especially the Mage Kingdom of Dalaran. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Ravaged by the Horde in the First War, King Tyrannus pledged his support towards the rebuilding of Stormwind. Turalyon would oversee much of the reconstruction by the Stonemasons Guild, led by Edwin Van Cleef. The Knights of the Silver Hand also dedicated themselves with aiding those that returned, by healing the sick and wounded, and providing whatever shelter they could to the victims of war. Not all that left Stormwind returned, finding that it was a reminder of all that was lost, but Prince Varian Wrynn would make his way back south and ascend to the throne. Varian would lead his people to reclaim their lost territories and see his kingdom prosper once again. Stormwind would be seen as a monument to the Alliance's tenacity, and while many of the northern kingdoms were plagued by the loss of homes and loved ones by the wars that had gripped the world, if a kingdom like Stormwind could rise again from the ashes, perhaps they could heal as well, given time. If you like this content, subscribe for more. The issue of what to do with the orcs was a controversial one. Trollbane of Stromgarde and Greymane of Gilneas demanded the orcs be executed and forever rid from Azeroth, but Tyrannus vowed for mercy, as that was what separated the Alliance from the orc savagery. The final verdict was life imprisonment, and a number of internment camps were constructed in New Stormwind to contain the orcs, though it was not a resolution that satisfied many. Thoris Trollbane's son, Dana, was the one put in command of the internment camps, where he and his wardens maintained order. The wardens began to notice a change in the orcs after a while. They began to grow lethargic and weak. Antonidas of Dalaran began to study them, and came up with the hypothesis that without the warlocks to feed them fell magic, they were going into withdrawal. Time would pass, and the orcs' bloodlust would diminish, and security at these camps would become much more relaxed. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Although the Dark Portal was destroyed, the Rift remained. Khadgar, now appointed as the Archmage, remained in the south to monitor the fell energies seeping from the portal. With a group of magi, they would try to close the rift, but ultimately fail. Instead, they turned their efforts towards ensuring the fell magic was prevented from seeping into the rest of Azeroth and killing it as it had done to Draenor. So long as the rift existed, however, the threat of another orc invasion was still a possibility. Khadgar's concerns were brought before the Alliance's council, where it was decided to build a fortress near the portal to monitor the fell energy seeping through the rift and keep an eye on what might come through. Netherguard Keep was constructed overlooking the Black Morass, where Khadgar would continue to study the rift. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Tensions between the Seven Kingdoms would only grow in the aftermath of the Second War. Gilneas and Stromgarde would grow more frustrated over the passing of the Internment Act, and Greymane would speak out against the taxing of Gilnean people for the construction of both the camps and Netherguard Keep. The question of what to do with the traitorous Alterac was also thrown around. With Aiden Perinold imprisoned, Stromgarde argued that Alterac should be annexed into its own territory to cover their losses during the war. Meanwhile, Gilneas suggested putting Perinold's nephew, Isidin, in command, as he had fled to Gilneas for refuge. A stranger by the name of Lord Davil Prester, an Alterac noble, would throw his hat into the ring, yet King Tyrannus wanted to turn the nation over to Perinold's son, Aladin. Prester would convince Tyrannus to hand him control of Alterac, but would disappear following the reopening of the Dark Portal. With Perinold dying while in prison, Lordaeron ultimately settled on simply annexing the nation into its own lands. If you like this content, subscribe for more. When the orcs first crossed through the Dark Portal, not all of the clans were brought through. Many remained behind to safeguard their homeworld, such as the Shadowmoon, Warsong, Thunderlord, and Shattered Hand clans, among others. Guarding the Dark Portal from the Draenor side was seen as rather boring, with most orcs just passing the time by playing dice. When the horde that passed into Azeroth retreated through it at the end of the Second War, it only added to the numbers of those now stuck on Draenor. With the portal destroyed, life was bleak for those trapped. Draenor was dying, and the fell magic that permeated the land from the orcs' rampant use of demonic energy had left the planet tainted. All life there was on the verge of extinction. It seemed as though there was nothing that could be done of their bleak situation, were it not for one orc that remained hopeful of what was to come. If you like this content, subscribe for more. Tarangor was once a member of the Shadowmoon clan that joined Gul'dan's Shadow Council. He was the first of the Shadowmoon shamans that became a warlock, and was instrumental in the construction of the Dark Portal. However, when Doomhammer took control of the Horde, Tarangor was slain. Death would not claim him, however, as Tarangor became the first to be transformed into a Death Knight. Taking the name of Taran Gorfiend, he followed Doomhammer all the way to Lordaeron. However, when the Horde fell, he led his Death Knights back through the Dark Portal. There, he met with Gul'dan's former mentor, Ner'zhul, the leader of the Shadowmoon clan. Ner'zhul wished to open gateways to other worlds and escape the dying Draenor, and Gorfiend decided to conquer a world of his own. Though they did not have what they needed to achieve this, powerful artifacts on Azeroth could potentially stabilize a number of portals. Another invasion of Azeroth would be difficult on their own, and so it was decided to unite the remaining clans on Draenor to seek out the 3 artifacts they needed from human lands.